Hey everybody, Justin here, and welcome to my latest live stream. This one is going to cover the very basics of getting started with the Behringer X32 digital console. For those that don't know what the X32 is, it was released back in the mid-2010s, and it's one of the most popular, if not, I would think the most popular digital consoles to be used for live sound for, concerts, really for houses of worship, and mainly because of the cost of the board and what you get for features as far as, what you spend on the board. There's a lot of things this soundboard can do, but for this tutorial, I'm just really going to go over the basics of how to get things going. I'm not going to go over setting up the AES-50 digital stage box, so we're not going to cover that. There are plenty of tutorials elsewhere on YouTube for that. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the channel strip that's up in the upper left of the board. I'm going to go over what you're going to be seeing on the screen, which really will depend on which view you go into for the channel strips and also for the talkback section, as well as the scenes over here. Let's just have a little bit of fun with this. So what is the Behringer X32? It's a 40 input, believe it's a 25 bus digital mixer. And by 40 inputs, there are 32 analog inputs, XLR. There are 6 auxiliary inputs, XLR on all 6 inputs. Inputs 5 and 6 also have RCA inputs. You also have 2 inputs via the USB card up here. So here you can plug in a USB flash drive formatted to FAT32. And the X32 can play back WAV files. You can also record 2-track, basically the main outs, to that USB stick if you'd like to do that. So that's kind of what it is. You can also expand the console with, like I said, the AES-50 network, which includes various stage boxes, the P16 personal monitoring setup. There's many different things you can do. You can also use the X32 as a 32 in-out USB interface for your computer for recording, provided that you have the X-USB card installed in the back of the X32, which I believe comes as stock. At least that's what came with this board when our church purchased it. You have very flexible routing on this board, meaning that you can assign any analog input or any AES input to any channel. There are more advanced routing options, but I'm not going to go over them in this video. So why don't we get started, and I will go over each of the functions on the top panel as best I can. We'll start with the faders. So we have 2 sections here. On the left, we've got 16 faders. On the right, we have 8, and then we have a master fader. All of these faders are motorized, and they're touch sensitive, I believe. So just to give you an example, right now we're seeing channels 1 through 16. If I bank over to 17 through 32, the faders are going to jump and represent the settings that I have for that. So while we're over here, why don't we talk about what I've got going on over here? So at the top here, we have a DAW remote button. This puts the X32 into DAW remote mode. Not a big fan of the way the remote mode works on this versus my Studio Live 64S. And the reason being is this DAW remote only gives you, I think it's these 8 faders to work with, and you have to bank between them, I believe. The DAW remote mode on the Studio Live gives you access to all 32 faders on that particular board, or however many faders you have on which Studio Live you have. But this allows you to control your recording software from the X32. Down here we have our different fader banks. We have channels 1 through 16. We have 17 through 32. We have our 6 auxiliary inputs, as well as our USB return from the flash drive, and as well as our 8 effects returns. And they're 8 because we have 4, excuse me, we have 4 effects, send and return effects, but they're run in stereo, so left and right. And you can see I'm controlling both the left and right of effects number 1, which is a reverb. And then over here, I have my aux masters. So here, in this particular setup, I basically have what's going on over here, So that's what's going on there. I'll get to this stuff up here in a second. On the right bank of faders, I'm just going to move around the camera so I can easily get to it. At the top, we have the Sends on Faders button. I'll talk about that in a second. Going down here, we have group DCAs 1 through 8. Now, what a DCA is, very simply put, it's a master volume control for whatever channels are assigned to it. Now, how do you know which channels are assigned to it? For example, here I've got a vocal DCA and I've got an instrument DCA. If I press and hold the select button up here, what will happen is I can see, I had a vocal channel over here, but I don't have it anymore. I can see which channels are assigned to that DCA, and I can turn them on or off. So I can freely assign which channels I want. So for example, that's the vocal DCA, and that's the instrument DCA, and those are all set up just fine. If I go down one, these are my mix buses 1 through 8. If I go down another one, this is 9 through 16. Buses 13 through 16 are for the send and return effects, and I'll talk about that. You can find those over here on the effects page. And if I go to effects home, you'll see on the left side we have, and I'll zoom in on the screen when we talk a little bit more about the effects. On the left, we have effects 1 through 4. Those relate to these 4 effects here. I'm going to go back home. And then we have our master fader. Down here, we have our mute groups. So this allows me to mute multiple channels at once without having to grab a bunch of mute buttons. Now, as you can see, I forgot to assign one of them. So I'll do that right now. To assign these mute groups, you just simply come up here and press the mute group button. We're going to hold down which mute group we want to set up, in this case mute group 2, and I just need to assign this by pressing the select button. So you assign the mute groups the same way you assign the DCAs that I showed you earlier. So those are the mute groups. Here we've got a phone holder. It doesn't quite fit a modern smartphone. It'll fit like an older iPhone that was like around, 2015 or whatever. Up here we have some assignable buttons, and we have 3 banks of them. So we have 4 assignable knobs, and we have 8 assignable buttons here, and we have 3 banks of those. I don't really use them that much. I just leave them set, but for here, for example, I've got a tap tempo for the delay effect, which is over on effect number 3. Above that, I have my scenes control. I'll talk about that in a minute. Above that, I have my monitor section. So if you connect a set of studio monitors to this board, you have your monitor level here. You also have a headphone level for your headphones. Now, the headphone jacks are located inside of the handles to the left and the right of the console. They're kind of inside, so you might want to avoid using any 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch adapters because it's very difficult trying to get them out. You also might want to avoid using a 90-degree angled adapter or cord in there because it might be a little bit difficult getting it in and out of there. We also have, let me go here. Over here we have our talkback section. Up here we have a lamp socket, so this will take a lamp, 12 volt, 5 watt. and it's on a 4-pin, looks like a 4-pin XLR. We have a talkback mic here, so you do have a built-in mic on the X32. I recommend setting up, like, say, a Shure SM58 dynamic or something and using that, because it's a little less sensitive than this, especially if you feed your mic through the monitors or sometimes even the mains. But you can send the talkback to 2 different sections over here. We don't really use it here here at this church because we're not in a very, very big room. And I also have the X32 controlled on an iPad, so I can easily run it from where my position is. But the talkback mic is here if it's needed. And to set it up, you just click the view button, and here you can assign the talkback a destination. So for example, I got it going to monitor 1, which is my first mix bus here. That's just as an example. So that's what we have going on the bottom half of the soundboard. I'll talk about what's going on around the screen in a little bit. But now let's check out the channel strip. So that's going to be in the upper left of the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to zoom my camera in so that you can see what's going on, and I'm going to attempt to move it a little bit so we can get a little close up. The camera might look a little wonky, and it's really, really sensitive to this remote control. So I would suggest putting your tray in the upright position before we do this. All right, so there we go. So there's our channel strip. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Come on. There you go. Good camera. Good camera. There's a good boy. Want a treat? Sorry, I don't have any. Okay. So this is our channel strip. And each block in the channel strip has a view button. So if you need to see something in a little more details and get a little more control over that particular section, you just touch the view button and it shows up on the screen. And I'll show you that in a minute once we get through going through each of these. We have our configuration and our preamp. So here we have our input gain. Here we have 48 volts. If you're using a condenser mic or an active direct box that requires phantom power, you'll want to turn this on. It doesn't need to be on if you're using a dynamic microphone. Here we have a phase button. This is handy if you're having some phase cancellation issues between 2 microphones, say on a drum kit. If you flip one of the microphones out of phase, it might give you a fuller sound. Sometimes with keyboards, if you run them in stereo using balanced connectors, they might sound out of phase. So one of the things you could do is, instead of pairing the 2 channels together left and right, what I do here is I keep them separate, and I can show you one of them is out of phase, and the keyboard will sound normal. It's not all keyboards that do this. Some of them do, some of them don't. Up here we have a low cut, and all this does is, I'm just going to select one of the vocal channels and I'll show you. What this does is it cuts out any frequencies below this setting on this knob. So typically for a vocal mic, I cut below 100 hertz. It gets rid of any rumbles. It gets rid of any footsteps, going around. It really cleans up the low end on a vocal mic, and I like having it adjustable. On most analog consoles, you'll have like a 1-button thing, so it's like, 75 hertz down. Having it adjustable means you've got more flexibility and more control over that. So that's what's going on up here. Down here we have a noise gate as well as a dynamics control for your compression, or an expander. Right now I have a noise gate on, and you can see it click in. You can see it come in. Matter of fact, I'm going to turn it right down. There we go. Matter of fact, for this, I'll shut it off because our pastor uses this mic. Actually, he uses a headset mic. I'm talking into a lapel mic, so I don't need that. But I use the noise gate in order to block out extra noises coming into that particular microphone. because his headset mic is an omnidirectional mic, it can pick up a lot of ambient noise, especially like a noisy air conditioner that's like right near the front. So that's what I like to use the gate for, is to block, that kind of thing from especially going into the live stream, because it gets very annoying after a while. Here we have the dynamics control for compression and expansion, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Next to that, we have the EQ control. So your main 32 inputs have a 4-band EQ, as well as the aux inputs have a four-band, fully parametric EQ. So you have a low mid, you have a high mid, and you have a high. You have full control over the bandwidth or the Q of that frequency. Here's your frequency control, and here's your gain. So up or down, cutting or boosting, right here. And then here you can turn it on and off. As a matter of fact, the low cut, the dynamics, and the gate all have on-off buttons. So there's no real menu diving that you have to do in order to turn those on and off. Next to that, you have your aux sends, or in this case, your bus sends. So the 16 outputs are called mix buses. And typically 1 through 12 on the X32 are good for monitors, which you can see, which you'd be able to see over on that right bank of faders, as well as the live stream control. And I'll talk about that. But here you can see channels 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, and 13 through 16. Next to that, you have your main bus assign. And we also have a mono bus here. Now, so this is for your mono bus here. So if you were going to send out to, say, a center channel speaker, or maybe out to a mono subwoofer, that's what that would be used for, and you can just turn it on and off here. When I mix live, like a live concert, I like to use this as for the subwoofers, and I'll run like maybe the bass and the kick drum through that, or maybe some synths too. It depends. And then over here we have our main assign. So here's our pan control, and here's an on-off. So this will basically turn off, for example, the microphone that I'm talking into. It'll turn it off in the main bus. So that's what's going on with the channel strip. Now what I want to do is I want to go to the screen. So here we have the main screen for the X32. It's not a touch screen, but I think once you get used to getting around the interface of it, it's not a big deal. We have 6 endless encoders on the bottom, and they correspond to 6 controls that are labeled on the bottom of the screen. Now, they're also push buttons. So, for example, excuse me, I can, if I push this button here, you can see this comp/exp, that's going to turn that on like that, and then it's going to turn it off like that. So basically, if you see something labeled down here on the bottom of the screen, that's what the push button function of these encoders do. Anything above that, when you turn the knob, that's what that adjusts. Over here, we have 2 different layers. We have layer 1 and layer 2. These are for the controls here, for these these encoders here. Here we have a page select, a set of page select buttons. These are going to go back and forth between these tabs up here, your pages. So for example, we're on home. There's our config. So that's the input. There's the gate. There's the compression. There's the EQ. There's our aux sends. And there's our main send right there. So now, for now, we'll just go home. Here we've got some more functions up here, and we've got some different screens, different areas we can go to. Here's the home screen. This is where you can kind of see everything at a glance. So you can see your input, your gate, your EQ, your dynamics, what you have inserted, if you have an insert effect on. In this case, I do. I have a 31-band EQ inserted, and that's located on effects 5 through 8. And then to the right of that, we have our output meter, as well as where it's assigned, so left and right, as well as the mono. And then to the right of that, we have a view of our auxiliary sends. So 1 through 8 on the top, 9 through 16 on the bottom. If we go to the meters page, you can see on the top half of these are our level meters. And on the bottom, these are our fader positions. So these are where all the faders are located. So for example, if I were to turn up this channel here, you can see the fader moving up and down. I'm just moving the fader on the console. Here we have the input routing page. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is where you can set up your inputs, your outputs, as well as any AES-50 devices that you have connected, like a digital snake or the P16, things like that. So I'm not going to go too much into that. Here we have the setup. So here we have basic setup functions of the X32. I'm not going to go too deep into these, but some of them you might want to be aware of. For example, over here, you can reset the console, you can reset the show data, the libraries, you can do a factory restore up here. Here you can back up to, say, a USB drive, so things like that. Here you can set the date and the time of the console, and that's shown right up here. Here you can also adjust your main LCD brightness, like that. Your LED brightness. So if let's see, if I hit this button here, it's going to select which one I want to do. So that takes care of the LED brightness. So that's all the buttons and stuff. And then below that are your channel LCDs for each of the channel scribble strips that are located above each fader. I'll talk about what those are in a second too. If we go down here, this is your library. This is where you can find channel presets, effect presets, routing presets, all that kind of stuff. I don't use too many presets other than maybe my vocal, if I need to copy my vocal to another channel, because sometimes, depending on what setup I use, I play keyboards. I might need 2 vocal mics if I've got 2 keyboard stands. So I might take my vocal preset and just simply load it onto another channel if I need to do that. Here we have our effects page. And we can see that on the left we have our reverbs and our delays. Those 4 effects correspond to the 4 effects sends that I showed you earlier on mix buses 13 through 16. On the right, we have insert effects here, and these can be inserted into pretty much any channel. So this is where you could insert maybe a different kind of compressor or an EQ. For example, I have this microphone on an EQ, and mainly for the sound of this room, because this room is very, very mid-rangey. I have to do a lot of cutting. I have to do a lot of cutting on the EQ, particularly here. So for example, I can show you what that looks like by, let me see, if I select, no, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to select, if I turn the 6th knob here, I can select which effect I want to see, and I just want to see this dual true EQ, and there's my EQ with a very nice spectrum analyzer. Very, very cool to be able to see that. And I've got a couple different ways I can edit it. I can use the knobs, or if I press this GEQ on faders, the 8 faders that you would normally use for your mix buses and things like that, you can use to edit the EQ. So very, very cool there. Right below that, we have the mute group button, and that's used to assign your mute groups. I showed you that earlier. Below that, we have a utility button here. So this is where you can, let's see, let's take a look. You can load presets, you can save presets, you can delete some presets. There's all kinds of different things you can do here. All right. But for now, we'll just go back to the home page. If I go back into the setup page, I do want to show a couple of other things. There's the console configuration page, not quite what I want to show you. There's the remote page. So this is for setting up the, I believe the DAW remote, which is that. If I go over here, this is the network page. This is where you want to set up your IP address for the soundboard. If you're going to use an iPad to control it, you want to make sure everything here matches up with what's on your iPad. It does require an external Wi-Fi router in order to remote control the X32 from an iPad or a tablet. If I go over here, this is where I can name my channels, and I can assign colors to the scribble strips that are in each channel. For example, the mic that I'm talking into right now is in a light blue, and it's already named Pastor, so I'm using the Pastor's channel to film this. But if I were to go to a vocal channel, you can see that it's selected as yellow, or I can select the channel here, depending on what I want to do. You can also give the channel like a picture. I don't like doing that. I like leaving all the pictures kind of blank. So that's kind of the basics of what we have going on over there. I do want to show you what the scribble strips look like. So we'll go ahead and pan the camera down there and give it a second to focus. So this is what the scribble strips look like. And that's the page that you just saw on the screen. We have the channel number. We have the input assignment. So if the input is anything other than the channel number, it'll show right below the channel number. In this case, this particular vocal mic, which happens to be the one that I use, is assigned to input 8. Now, why is it not assigned to input 10? I'll explain. The way our setup works here is we have a 24-channel snake coming from, and it's an analog snake coming from up here in the balcony on the X32, going all the way to the front onto the very right side of the platform. What I've done, because I don't want to have a big mess of cables going everywhere, is I've installed 2 8-channel sub-snakes on either side of, like, say, the middle of the platform. So near the left side of the platform, as you're looking at the platform, the left side I have channels 9 through 16, or inputs 9 through 16, and on the right side I have inputs 1 through 8. So it doesn't really make sense to run a cable all the way from the left side to the right. So the cool thing is I can plug it in, I can plug my microphone into the sub-snake on the right, and then I can take that input and I can assign it to, what is this, channel 10, which is where I need it. Now, and that's what's showing there. Let me go back to my main, I'm going to go back to my main camera view here. Now, what in the world am I talking about? Well, if I view the config/preamp section and I zoom back in on the screen, let's show you what's going on. So this is really cool. I'm going to go ahead and select channel 10. So this is really cool because I can basically take any of those 16 inputs from those sub-snakes, or I can take 17 through 24, and I can tell channel 10, okay, I want you to receive input from, in this case, input number 8. So that's a really easy way to take any input, any analog input on, like, the snake that's maybe about 90 feet away, and really put it on any channel you want. It's a good way to keep the board organized, so you could have all your instruments put together, even though you might have instruments on the left side of the stage, the right side of the stage. So that's a really good tip to have, a really good tool to have in the toolbox as far as getting around the X32. And all of these channel routings are saved per scene, and I'll talk about what scenes are in a minute. But if you go to, like I said, if you come up here, you have your source, which is your analog input, and I've basically just told channel 10, which is my vocal channel. I've got my mic plugged into input 8, and you can see it there. So you can see I've got a microphone over there. So that's kind of how that works, and that's a really cool thing to have. Like I said, if you don't want to run cables all over the place, it's a good way to keep things neat on the stage and keep things organized on the soundboard. While we're here, I'll go through the different screens on the channel strip. Like I said, here's your gate, and then you've got some more controls for that. Here's your dynamics. So a lot of times I might have somebody on this lapel mic, and actually at one time I had to have it compressed so bad because we had somebody on this particular channel that's a very soft speaker and doesn't really get loud at all. So really the only way that I felt like I could bring him up in volume, or if he gets really loud and really soft, I've really got to drive it down in volume. So that's what a compressor does. A compressor takes the loud stuff and squashes it down to meet where the soft stuff is. And like I said, I like to use it on vocals, and I do. It also allows me to back away from a mic if I need to look at my sheet music or my iPad. That compressor allows me to do that and still be heard over the mic. Here's the EQ page, and I'll select the channel that I'm speaking through. So here's the EQ page. Here's where you can see what's really going on with that EQ. You can make adjustments from this page using the 6 knobs. I do things that way, but I also like to use the EQ on the channel strip itself that's on the board. One thing I didn't mention is that the channels, the input channels, have a 4-band EQ. The output mix buses, as well as the main bus, have a 6-band EQ. And to get to your other bands, for example, your low or your low mid, you just have to push low and low mid together, and that gets you to the low 2. Or you push the high and the high mid together, that'll get you to the high 2 or or band number 5. So again, it makes things a little more flexible as far as EQing and tuning your mains or your monitors or things like that. All right, so that's kind of what's going on there. All right, I'm going to talk about one last thing before I wrap things up here. And I'm going to talk about mix buses. And again, we're going to keep this really simple. The way we use our mix buses is we have 2 different monitor feeds, and we have a feed for our live stream. Now, typically on a soundboard, you have auxiliary sends, and I already showed you what those were. Those are up here. Those are the bus sends. This is how you send these 16 channels to, let's say, a monitor or your live stream. Now, I said you could do it like that, but what if you want to see everything at once? Well, there's a special little button at the top here called Sends on Fader. Right now you're seeing the main mix, but if I hit this button and I've got my right monitor selected, and that's going to be the monitor, this is from the what I call the performance perspective. So stage left and stage right, if you don't know the difference, it's from the performer's perspective. So our left is the audience's right. So the right monitor here is selected. If I press this Sends on Fader button, that is what I'm sending to that monitor. This is what I'm sending to the left monitor. Obviously, the left monitor is my monitor, so I need to hear more of my vocals as well as the keys. If I go to the next one, this is what's being sent to our live stream and what you're hearing right now. Now, the other cool thing that you can do is, if I go back home, you can link two mix buses together and have a stereo bus, which is how we're feeding our live stream and how we're able to get stereo sound. What does stereo mean? It means you have a left speaker and a right speaker, and I can put things anywhere I want between the left and the right speakers. So that's what that is. Now, I'm going to just press the Sends on Fader button. Okay, here's my main mix. Let's say you were running a live stream and you wanted to fix the live stream mix without changing anything that's going on in the main mix. Okay, it sounds good inside, inside your room. The balance is great, but maybe not so much the live stream. That's where you want to use a mix bus here. And in this case, I'm using 3 and 4 to feed to an ATEM Mini Pro, which is what I'm using for the camera control as well as the audio. If I select either one of these, because remember, these are paired together, select either one and then press the Sends on Fader button, that is now going to have these faders control the mix for the live stream. And whatever I do here on this page will not affect either the monitor sends, and it won't affect what's going on in the room as far as the main mix. So really, really simple to set that up. For example, if I wanted to set up another monitor send, let's say over on Mix Bus 5, okay, what do I need on Mix Bus 5? Let's say I'm sending this to the drummer. The drummer needs to hear vocals, so we're going to bring those right up. The drummer might need to hear maybe some keys, so I want to bring those both up because they're left and right. He's definitely going to want bass. He's definitely going to want maybe a little bit of acoustic guitar, maybe the tiniest bit of violin. So now I've just basically created a monitor mix for, let's say, a drummer. If I go back to the live stream mix, nothing got changed. It's all the same. So perfect, perfect, sounds good, nicey, nicey. I'm looking at the comments right now. XR18 has gone down today. Could you recommend a Stagebox digital mixer under 3K? Yes. To answer your question, if you want to stay within the Behringer department, there's the X32 rack. You also have the wing rack. I would go for the X32 because that's going to give you more inputs than the wing does. The wing is going to require you to get an additional stage box because the inputs, the analog ins are a bit limited on it. So I would go with the X32 rack if you're comfortable with running an iPad. Another affordable option might be the PreSonus Studio Live 32R. That's going to be a 32 channel 16 out. So 32 in, 16 out mixer / stage box. It is a mixer, a digital mixer. You can run it with the universal control software, but you can also put it into stage box mode if you have a Studio Live console. So I could have done that with my rig. I could have gotten a Studio Live 32R and used it as a stage box. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I just wanted a stage box. I didn't, but that's just me. But anyway, that's a little off topic. So yeah, to answer your question, I would recommend either the X32R or I would check out the Studio Live 32R, which is the PreSonus board. Anyway, so I've pretty much covered the basics. What I didn't cover, and I'll do it really, really quick before I wrap this up, is how to set up effects. You do that by pressing the Effects tab and making sure that you, if you want to see all 8 effects and what you have assigned, press the 6th knob over here to get to Effects Home. And out of the box, Behringer's set up a couple of reverbs, a delay, and then a chorus, I believe. But if you wanted to go and edit those, you turn the 6th knob to select the effect that you want to edit, and you press in the knob. So now I'm editing the reverb. Okay, but how do you send that? How do you send a microphone to that particular effect? Well, if I come out of Sends on Fader, if I go to Mix Buses 13 through 16, here are my 4 effects. Here's my first reverb effect. select that and press Sends on Fader. Now here I like putting the, I don't know why I've got the bass on here. I like putting the acoustic guitar through a little bit of reverb. Maybe I'll put some violin through it. But Reverb 2, I have set up a little bit different. That's where I have some vocals set up right there. Okay, but how do I send that to, let's say, a monitor mix? Watch this. The Sends on Fader is on. Left monitor. So if I wanted to hear reverb in my monitor, here we go. This is where I would do it. So now I can send, instead of seeing where the effects are going to my mains, I can now hit Sends on Fader and I can send all the effects to my monitors, or even the live stream if I wanted to do that, and I do, because it really does open up the sound on the live stream. So that's a little bit of the effects. Now we'll just go back home. And I think I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover in this video. I hope it was a big help for somebody maybe thinking about purchasing an X32, or maybe you've just purchased an X32 and weren't quite sure where to go on it. I think I've covered the basics, and like I said, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover on this. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it a live stream for now. Thank you everybody for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this stream, or like anything else on my channel. Also click the notification bell. You'll be notified anytime I go live or anytime I release a new video. Also, if you want to check out some other music gear, excuse me. If you want to check out some other music gear, there will be a link over to Zounds, and I do have an affiliate with them. So any purchase you make from their website by clicking the link below this video, I get a little bit of a commission on. So not only are you helping yourself out by getting great gear, you're helping me out by supporting the channel at the same time. If you want to check out any of my music, head over to my Bandcamp page, and that is right down at the bottom at the banner, that banner that's kind of going across the bottom. Yeah, you can kind of, justinhavey.bandcamp.com. That's kind of what it says. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Take care.